Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. I am your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm delighted to welcome a very, very accomplished and committed social entrepreneur from India, Mr. Vamsi Udayagiri. Vamsi, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Mr. Ashutosh, and very happy to be in this show.
Thank you. Vamsi is the founder and CEO of Hesa, which is a B2B digital platform for rural customers. And he has always been fascinated by rural value chains. So, Vamsi, let's start with talking about Hesa. Tell me about this venture.
Yeah, so we at Hesa are redefining the way commerce is done at rural. If you typically look at the way rural India works, any consumer who's sitting in village today have to, literally get into a nearby mandi or a mart or a town or a district headquarters or as close as an ATM or a bank, because all the services are not available in a village.
Correct.
And there are 85 crore people like rural folks who have to literally depend on traveling to a nearby place because all the services being not available in that place. And if you see, 4.2 lakh villages have less than 10K population, and 2.7 lakh villages out of this have less than 5,000 population, and becomes really impossible for a consumer to avail all this because businesses couldn't reach out to them. Businesses couldn't reach out to them because of the unviable unit economics. Let's say I'm a business, I want to go and penetrate into a village of 1,000 or a 2,000. My cost of operation versus revenues doesn't match. So with all this problem statement of consumers not able to avail and businesses not able to reach, we thought that rural India needs a sector agnostic marketplace.
Correct.
So anything and everything a consumer need in a village has been aggregated into a super app for Bharat called Hesa. And offered to the village level consumers.
Wonderful. And does Hesa stand for anything?
Hesa in Sanskrit has a meaning of excellence in grandeur. Yeah, but there is a good sounding to the name, and that's how we coined that name.
Wonderful. So also tell me, for our viewers and listeners, what is a rural value chain?
See, if you see typically the entire rural value chain, and there are like multiple, and the good part about the rural is, I think in rural only you will find the same consumer being a seller sometimes and a buyer sometimes, which is not happen in an urban scenario because most of the us would be in jobs or other things. But being a consumer or a citizen, I would say I need to buy my FMCG products, I need to pay my bills, I need to buy insurance, I need to buy two-wheeler, whatever. But at the same time, if I'm a farmer, I need to sell my produce. If I'm a handloom worker, I need to sell that produce. So, for as far as we, like the way we see it, I think, rural has to be seen as, an individual kind of a value chain rather than looking at differently, whether it's an agri value chain or a fintech value chain, because, the beauty is the same consumer needs 10 different things.
Correct.
And the way, the rural value chain is kind of made is, why can't there be a single marketplace or a value chain which connects various needs that a person needs, across multiple levels, so that everybody in that value chain, whether be it a buyer who wants to buy, agri produce from the farmers, or whether there is an FMCG brand who want to reach out to those target consumers, or a bank who want to, expand their services. I think the rural value chain for us is to create an integrated, marketplace covering all aspects of what a consumer needs in a village.
So if I understand it correctly, what you're doing is, there are small businessmen in rural India. The Hesa is basically a fulfillment partner for a lot of these small businesses.
In a way, yes. What happens is, as the consumer today, can't access the digital platforms like an urban consumer.
Correct.
So we are creating, or facilitating by, enabling a micro entrepreneur, in a village, who is either a women group member or a farming community member or a kirana store owner or a first-time micro entrepreneurs who are youth, who otherwise would have become a delivery boy or a driver in an urban. So these are the personas we identify. We give a tech platform so that they use this platform to cater to the multiple needs. So answering your first part of it, so we are not only enabling a small businesses to reach out to the rural, we are also enabling a large corporates or many startups who want to go and operate in that village, and they can't go and operate because their economics doesn't work out today.
Very interesting. So, whenever I've spoken to people who have taken such aggressive and committed steps in rural India, uh, they've always faced several challenges because rural India is not the same market all over our country. I'd like to understand from you what have been some of your challenges and some of your learnings.
Great. I mean, as normally we say, every 100 kilometers you travel, you find a different country, in India, which is, many changes in terms of culture, language, speak or, behave or react. So there are many challenges, but, uh, before actually I started Hesa, I've been observing and doing a lot of things in rural. You won't believe, in 2010-11, I personally visited almost 4,800 villages to understand across 5-7 states, like how rural works, how various things happens. Then I thought that, it's easy to crack rural, but again, it took 9 years for me to actually crack it. The thing is, many people have seen rural as an individual sector specific or a product specific or a service specific, which is not like, for example, the way urban is evolving today, you can have a product to a particular gender with an age group, with a behavioral pattern. You can, classify to such an extent, but, the rural being, so spread across. In a village, you have only 500,000 population versus there is a village with 10,000 population. I think first thing is, any single sector specific, if we go, I think it's very tough to crack. That's why you don't find really, a lot of these agri-tech, fintech startups scaling beyond a point, because it's really tough to go and operate.
Correct.
And it's even better to go and operate at a 10-15,000 population. But there are 2 lakh villages, less than 5K population, where it's almost impossible. So first thing is, I think the big challenge that, observed is, if you go with a one product line or a service line, one, economics doesn't work out, scaling becomes very tough. Second thing is, you shouldn't always create a model which is a consumer specific. Normally, I also tried doing a B2C kind of a model where you launch a product and, offer it to a consumer. But again, rather, create a B2B2C model wherein you enable a microfinance organization to get into a rural, or a dairy organization to get in, so that, it gives a reach to, let's say, larger consumer base. That's where you can upsell, cross-sell different things. So that's one of the learning.
Very
So I
interesting.
think these 2-3 things, I can keep on telling many things, but yeah, these are a couple of major pointers.
Fascinating. So one of the other things that I have heard, and you can tell me if it's right or not, is that the rural consumer is far more conscious of their financial commitments and payments, and therefore the bad debts are much lower in rural India as compared to urban India. Would that be a fair statement?
I wouldn't really generalize it, but in a way it's true, because the the thing is, again, it has evolved from last 10 years. Always they're like, financially, kind of really, worthy, or, really focused on what, their needs versus how much they can pay. But really, I think the aspiration goals in rural also increased now. In fact, you won't believe, we have sold almost like a 1 lakh worth of TVs, almost 10-12, in the last 2-3 months. So which is in a rural, I'm talking about 1,000 population village. And people, either buy through an EMI or, either directly. But I think in a way, yes, definitely, I don't want to compare with the urban, but definitely the rural consumers are completely aware of, many factors, because, one, they come with that, basic financial ethics. And, also there is a kind of, what do I say, a kind of respect that they have in a village. Like, for example, if somebody defaults in an urban versus rural, rural in a village where I'm known, I can't take that risk of, really, defaulting, so that somebody comes to my house and, creates a situation. So I think that way, I think definitely, they are in good off.
Very interesting. My next question to you, Vamsi, is that how is technology changing rural markets and the rural consumer?
Great. I think the reason that we at Hesa today are doing is because of the entire technology platform.
Mm-hmm.
Because while I said that I visited many villages, kind of understood. I thought of creating something similar in 2012.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, I have named it as Palle Seva. Palle is village in Telugu and Seva is service. So something similar to that with whatever idea I had in 2011.
Mm-hmm.
But after doing a couple of pilots, I realized that I think this can't be scaled without a technology platform. So I think though rural or though for Hesa, it's a physical first and then digital. I think the way to go forward is digital first and then physical. So that's why we coined ourselves as a phygital, kind of a way where there is a person physically presenting and who is connected with a tech platform and who can literally connect anything and everything a consumer needs in a village. So technology is really playing a major role today. While if I'm talking today, in this call, I'm at a village 40 kilometers from Visakhapatnam, where we are able to get bandwidth of this entire call. And
Correct.
we're enabling many transactions as varied as an Aadhaar enabled payment to a bill payment to an insurance to buying products, buying availing services. So I think technology is the key to grow this entire segment there.
Very interesting. And again, when I was preparing to talk to you, I was reading about supply chain challenges in the rural India, and I was reading that the big platforms somehow have chosen not to go into tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 cities. You have chosen to go there. What have been some of your supply chain challenges?
Okay, I think I'll answer this in a different way, because for larger organizations, more than supply chain challenges, one is the economic challenges, and second is the discovery challenge. See, for a large organization today, for them it's very tough to discover where my customer is, or where if I'm a buyer, let's say where my farm produce is coming from, or this agri produce is coming, or handloom, whatever, or a company who is penetrating into products today. An FMCG brand is largely dependent on the traditional value chain, where the distributor is sitting in a 1 lakh population village, where he is happy catering to that 1 lakh population village, because the density is enabling him to get the revenues.
Correct.
And for him to get into those villages individually, it will not work. So I think that's the entire problem we are trying to solve, and we are more of a discovery platform. So we go and tell a brand like any brand saying that, okay, in this village these are the consumers who are relevant to your product, and our Hesati can actually order on their behalf, he can stock on their behalf. But that's how we are solving that, wherein for a brand, their last mile distributor delivering a chunk of products to a Hesati is not a problem, but for him to go and identify those consumers and getting into villages is a problem which we are solving.
Interesting. And my next question to you, Vamsi, is that what are some of the pain points that plague Bharat?
Okay, so couple of things, because the entire socio-economic situation in rural itself is the biggest challenge today, if you see, because over the years we have seen a lot of migration from rural to urban. Especially after COVID phase 1, we thought that there is a good amount of reverse migration happening, but it couldn't sustain much. In a way, yes, because people are getting opportunities there. But I fundamentally belong to this thesis that people should be in their own places.
Correct.
And if we can create that socio-economic impact in their own place, so that they can not only earn, but they can also kind of impact others' lives. But I think to provide a right opportunity in a village today, are we fully equipped as Bharat? I think that's where the gap is. I think with our kind of models, we may create 10, 15 kind of livelihoods in villages, or enable multiple consumers, but still at a large quantum, if all these 1,000 people could able to create if something creates for them in their own village, that's an ideal situation for Bharat. So I think our model may not completely address that, but at least it will create one the opportunities for not only employment, for entrepreneurship in rural, and most importantly, the money in rural rotates in money only, in rural only, because the same consumer trying to do certain things and not going to a nearby town where all the services are available there. I think that's the first challenge which Bharat has. And the second thing is, I think the consumer not using the technology for a transaction. So that's also kind of a challenge because of multiple reasons, literacy, or a lot of people, you won't believe, people use for YouTube, TikTok, but not for transacting. So I think these are a couple of challenges.
Fascinating. Talking to you, I can see the wealth of knowledge you have on your markets in rural India. My next question to you, and again, this is based on my own experience, that technology empowers people. Technology also opens up the country, the world, to every citizen. My question to you is that in rural India, how are the elders and the leaders reacting to such an open communication, availability of everything from around the world in their in their villages?
I think slow. I mean, as I said, today the rural is really kind of changed. A lot of aspirational. They are welcoming new ideas and kind of doing it. I think overall the reaction is very good, because today a farmer, rather than getting into a mandi and waiting for somebody to sell their produce at the farm gate itself. I'm not only telling about Hesa, but there are many models who are helping, who are helping literally these rural folks, whether they are a consumer or a farmer or old people or leaders, on multiple transactions. And I think overall it is good for the the economy only, or their village only. I think the response has been really good, and people are really welcoming. The fact that we are able to scale in such a short time, in in last 18 months we have really scaled to 3 states. We are present in 20,000 villages. I think it's all because I think there is a good welcome from these rural folks.
And you spoke a few minutes ago about selling televisions in some villages, and I'm sure you're handling other white goods and consumer durables. How do you handle after-sale service and challenges of maintenance?
Yeah, I think after-sale service is definitely a challenge. And see, today, whether it's an urban customer or a rural customer or anyone, once the brand, the product is sold in an outlet or an Amazon or an online marketplace, the service is provided directly by the service providers. So that's why normally, though we give opportunity for the Hesati, I mean, our entrepreneur we call as Hesati, or the consumer their own, opportunity to select. But normally, we kind of tie up with products where there is a service center, at least, in the nearby town or a district headquarters, which is 40, 50 meters away. So I think that's what we are doing it. So all the tie-ups that we do it, the kind of products that we do it, we ensure that the service levels, are good, maintained by the brand, and most importantly, the service center is at least in their nearest 40, 50 kilometers radius.
Amazing. So once you have time for 2 more questions for you, my next question is, what is the size of the rural market? And I know it's a very, very broad-based question, because it'll all be, under different categories, etc. But give me some kind of an idea.
Honestly speaking, I think can't even quantify the kind of the market rural is. In fact, this sometimes when I have this conversations with our investors or stakeholders or whatever, I think the entire rural markets economy is the potential which it have. But to give some size to it, I think the FMCG business itself in rural is a 650 billion. The agri organized value chain today happening is more than a 600 billion. You won't believe, in Andhra, Telangana, the organized agri trade that happens in a year is 90,000 crore, which is enormous. I'm just talking about 2 states.
Yeah.
So I think it can be very huge. But what I feel is, I think in 2 to 3 years down the line, it will be running into few lakh crores. I'm not able even to quantify, but I personally feel that it may be some 10,000 to 10 lakh to 12 lakh crores of the market potential is what rural have.
Amazing. We talk about India being a GDP of about 3 trillion. We should be hitting it maybe by March or April.
Yes.
But when we talk of 3 trillion, the numbers you are giving me could be almost 40-50% of it is already rural. And you're saying that it could be the economy that will power India.
Yeah.
Okay. So my last question to you. Thank you, Vamsi. And my last question to you now is about the young people. Our country, and you yourself are very young. I'm from much older generation. And I've always said that the millennials and the Gen Zs are the people who are inheriting our country from people of my generation. And I'm sure they'll do a very, very good job of running our world. I want to understand from you, based on your interactions in your markets, how are millennials and Gen Z aspirations of rural India any different from urban India?
Great. Yeah, I think sometimes I also feel the kind of interaction that I do with these young folks. Sometimes I feel I'm also old. But
Okay.
leaving aside,
If you say so, yeah.
leaving aside, you won't believe. I think the kind of the tech usage, people today in rural are using. In fact, I can't use that kind of tech platforms, whether it's for broadcasting, whether it's for transacting or anything. But coming specifically to I would answer this in two ways. One is the millennials. Overall, I would say I think these days I'm actually working with many younger startups where sometimes people reach out to me for mentoring or advising or whatever. I think the kind of concepts they're bringing in and the kind of energy they put in to create something, I think it's phenomenal. And they're not even worried about taking risks. Probably one, maybe the age at which they can if something goes wrong also, I think they can still come back. But the point is, I think the kind of the models that they're coming with, so innovative, so widespread, and so future specific and all models. But anyway, now coming to the rural specific, I would say overall the aspirational goals have been really higher. The people have become entrepreneurial, and you won't believe around 28 to 30% of our entrepreneurs are these young, youth who otherwise, as I said, would have migrated to an urban, but with their entrepreneurial mindset, because there are certain of these VLEs, you won't believe. I think their day starts with Hesa and ends with Hesa, where they are so proactive. They go to all these consumers' houses. They plan in such a way that every third they go to all pensioners' house to help withdraw pension. Every eighth they help to do their bill payments, or every 15th whenever there is an agri market trade happening, they help. So I think if people have really kind of scaled on having aspirational or entrepreneurial spirit. Coming to, there are very specific, I would say at this point it's very minimal, but there are a lot of these people who also wanted to do something on their own, where these days we have come across really good rural folks who are making their own rotavators, for example, or some farm tools where they are creating something on their own. But this percentage is very less at this point. I think already a lot of initiatives taken. For example, the state in which we are, Telangana government has taken a lot of initiatives. We are working with them. NABARD is taking a lot of initiatives. Overall, also there are a lot of initiatives happening. But I think at a large, if some startup India or something can do a kind of a rural innovation program also to bring those rural entrepreneurs, I think it will have a significant impact. But I think overall it has been a significant growth in terms of people looking aspirational or trying to, millennials really looking at creating something on their own.
Fascinating. Vamsi, on that note, thank you so much. It's been such a privilege speaking to you. Thank you for talking to me about what you're doing in Hesa. Thank you for talking to me about rural markets, about your challenges. And most importantly, I mean, I get very, very enthused when you tell me that the startup culture seems to be getting into rural India as well, because that is a very large portion of our country, which I think will power our economy into a different league altogether. Thank you again and good luck.
Thank you, and thank you for all your nice words. I think rural India is really, I think next decade is going to be rural India. So that's what I personally feel also.
I agree with you. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.